my friends, my name is Mark Graham with the Source of Story YouTube channel and Runes for Writers. In this video we're going to look at another rune casting, this time using our cards. You can also use tiles if you have them. This is the 5 Elements rune casting. Now this rune casting is great for scene work. You can expand it to the sequence or even the act level. And this, as the name would suggest, is based upon the 5 elements. Now, 5 elements, I hear you ask. In Western culture, we're used to the 4 elements of fire, air, water, and earth. But in Indo-European culture, from which Norse civilization descended, there were 5 elements. And we see this today in Vedic tradition, in Chinese, Taoist traditions. There are 5 elements. And these are ether, air, fire, water, and earth. That's in order of increasing density. Now, if you're familiar with Eastern traditions through Feng Shui, Taoism, things of that nature, you may recognize metal and wood as elements, and these have been transposed into ether for wood and air for metal. And we'll get into what those mean here in a bit. So let's jump in. Now, if you're using tiles, I want you to shake up your tile pouch or the box or whatever container you have your tiles in to get them good and mixed up. If you're using cards, if they are in order for some reason, then I want you to give 5 good shuffles. 5 shuffles will ensure complete randomization from a stasis point, from ground zero, from being in order to fully randomized. We'll get you there in 5 shuffles. If they're already fairly randomized, as mine are, you can just give them 3 shuffles. That'll get them good and mixed up, and you'll be on your way. So I prefer a Riffle Shuffle. You can do an overhand shuffle if you like. You can spread them out on your table and randomize them that way. That's fine as well. For a Riffle Shuffle, we're going to split the deck in half. You want to rotate it end to end, and this will randomize the cards in orientation of upright and reversed as well. We give them 1 shuffle for Vili. We give them a shuffle for Ve. And another shuffle for the 3rd aspect, which is Odin himself. Okay, so our cards are fully randomized. Now this is a diamond pattern layout. And we'll just go through and do it right here. So the first card is in the center, and that represents the earth element. After that is we go down. I'll explain the directions as well. We go down, which is north, which is the water element. To the east is ether. To the south above is fire. And to the west or to the right is air. Now once you've got your cards laid out, and we'll go through these in detail. Once they're laid out, I want you to go ahead and mark them down. We have our recording form, so you can go ahead and keep track of this. Either shoot a picture or mark on your notepad what this layout is. I'm going to do that. I'll be right back. Okay, so we have our layout, and we'll just go through these in order. One thing to clarify, I said that north is down, and in the ancient tradition, I know we're used to seeing north at the top of our maps. In ancient tradition, north was seen as down. This is because as you go further and further north, you're getting farther and farther away from the sun. This is relative to the northern hemisphere. So the north was a place of darkness as opposed to the bright and sunny south. So we have north below the horizon or below the central card and south above. If you're more comfortable with the modern convention, you can flip this around. It's fine. You just want to go clockwise so that you're going center, north, east, south, and then west. So in the center, we have the earth element. Earth represents the present situation of the scene or the character within the scene. And in this case, we have Hagalaj. Now, Hagalaj cannot be reversed. It is what it is. Hagalaj literally means hail, the solid precipitation that falls out of the sky and dings up your car and your roof. It stands for purification. Where I live in Colorado, we're very familiar with snowfall. occasional rain, we get a lot more snow than rain. And there's something so purifying and centering with a great snowfall. I love a heavy thunderstorm as well. And there's that sense of purification that comes from this. And I think this is what the Norse ancestors understood, in that with this precipitation comes purification. Now, this is purification for an individual or a situation as well. And depending on how welcoming the subject is to change, to that purification, that will dictate the severity of the purifying influence. If the character, in my case he, is welcoming of this change, it can be a gentle snowfall, a light mist. If he's resisting the change, it may take a hailstorm to get through that this change is happening, this purification is happening, whether you like it or not. So this Hagalaj rune is often seen as negative because of that hailstorm influence. But if you're open to change, if you're receptive, if you recognize that purification can feel like a loss, but it's cutting away of dead material, of things that no longer serve the person, the situation, what have you. If you're welcoming to that, it can be a much easier process. If you're resistant, hailstorm. So that's what we have here. So in the current situation, we see that there is a need for purification. The remaining cards will tell us the surrounding, literally the surrounding circumstances of this, but we're in a position of purification, of change, of a shift from one way of being into another. That is our current situation. In the north position, north is the location of the element of water in Norse cosmology. We have Niflheim, Mist World, which is located in the north. This is where the ice giants are, and this is a land of water and ice. So we have the water element, and this stands for the constricting influences on the situation. The things that are slowing it down, as trying to wade through water, you can't move as fast as you can on ground, or even halt it in its tracks by freezing that water around it and creating ice and just rooting it down so it can't move. So these are the forces that are trying to bring things to a stop. This is a great rune casting for me. Here we have Elhaz, and Elhaz literally means elk. It stands for protection and can also stand for, in Norse cosmology, for the shaman, for the priest standing with his arms. You can kind of see in that look, it's the shaman standing with his arms outstretched before the gods, standing between the gods and the people, creating that protection for them. Now, the European elk was much larger than we think of as American elk. It's actually more closely related to our moose, so it's huge. Some of the antler spans from carcasses, from fossils that we found, have up to 13 feet antler spans. So these creatures are enormous. Even today, they're quite large. While they're not necessarily territorial, they are very protective of themselves, of their young. And there are instances of European elk, of moose, killing a predator, a wolf, a bear, with these huge antlers or with their hooves. So this is that protection, either of one's young, in the case, if we look at this as the shaman, protection of the tribe. It can also be an attunement, the kind of, we would see them as antenna almost. So this is being in alignment. This is Elhaz upright. In our case, we have Elhaz reversed in the north, in the water element, which is in the place of constricting or restraining forces. So here we have resisting the purification that is in our central position. We have forces of weakness. Instead of protection, we are weak, we're vulnerable. Alternately, this is the dark shaman, the sorcerer, who is contradicting the forces of nature, who rather than offering protection is offering harm. And in this case, that harm is in resisting that purification. So this tells us we're getting a hailstorm. Okay, so these are the static forces, the things that are resisting change. In this case, we have someone that should be standing in a protective nature who is not. That protection is absent or even turned on its head and is actually causing harm. We move now to the side, to the east, and this is the ether element. I mentioned previously that in the Eastern traditions, this would be associated with wood. And in the Norse reading, we see this as ether, and this is the expansive element. We put this in the east because the east in Norse mythology is the direction of Jotunheim, which is the giant home. So this is where these giants who are forces of nature reside. Now we tend to think of giants as these huge mindless creatures that just go about stomping, destroying things, eating, tearing the heads off of people. In some cases, yes. As we dig into the mythology, we can recognize in the giants the forces of gravity, of thunderstorms, of ocean tides, of aging, of old age, of time itself. So we think of the giants really as forces of nature. And where they become destructive, these giants are huge, growing, expansive creatures, and they grow and grow and grow. So this is the expansive element. And where it becomes destructive is if it grows and begins to push everything else aside, or if it grows to the point of explosion. So it has to be countered, and that's the activity in the myths of Thor, who's always in the east killing giants. He's not necessarily destroying them, he's balancing them out. He's putting restraint upon the giants. So we are in the east, and we are looking at expansive elements. So these are the rare elements. These are the forces acting on the character or the situation who want to uplift it, to bring it into its fullness of being. The East is also the realm of individuality and identity. So these are the forces that are trying to bring the best out of the circumstances and who have the best interests of the character at heart. So here we have Dagaz. Now Dagaz means day, and it stands for success. It stands for completion. It stands for balance, the balance between light and dark, and that cycle, that sequence of light turning to dark, turning to light. Day becomes night, becomes day again. So here we have a natural flow and an order of things. So this suggests that if order can be established, then that will result in the highest good for the character and for the situation. That is Dagaz. In the East, Dagaz cannot be reversed, so it is a very benefic rune, a very benefic power to the situation, and simply finding that balance and that natural cycle, that natural harmony in the situation will result in the greatest good. Next to the south, in the element of fire, we have Manaj upright. Now, the fire represents activating element. In the Norse cosmology, fire lives in Muspelheim, and Muspelheim is in the south, and this is fire home. And the world came into being. Out of nothingness came fire as the first activating element. And with the static condition of Niflheim, of Mistholm, that the frozen land, fire leapt across the void. Radiation can pass through the void where matter may not be able to. So that heat began to melt and to vaporize parts of Nibelheim, and as they would then cool again, descend back into ice, they melt, they evaporate, they turn, and through this cycle of thawing and melting and evaporating and freezing again, life, the very physical expression of the universe, came into being. So that resulted from fire. So fire is our activating element. And here we have manas. Now manas means mind. It can mean, in the ancient language, it also meant moon. It also meant man, human being, not necessarily a male, which was wer, but a human being. And this reflects the Norse notion of humans as unique in having mental consciousness, of being self-aware, and that is Homo sapiens sapiens, that their mind could contemplate their own being. That is humanity's unique gift, so far as we know. So manas also meant moon. And as we've talked about previously, we have Sowilo, which is sun, and also soul. And the sun was seen as the soul of the universe, the soul of creation. In the same regard, the moon was seen as the mind. And as the moon is the reflection of the sun, so the mind is the reflection of the soul. It's a beautiful cosmology, a beautiful mythology and understanding of the world. If you stare into the sun for too long, you'll go blind, and it will handicap your ability to interact with the physical world. So the soul is important, but we can only give so much focus to it. In the same way, you can stare at the moon endlessly. The brightest full moon, you can gaze into it all night and do no damage to yourself. And that is the reflection of the sun. In the same way as the mind is the reflection of the soul, you can contemplate the mind, stare at the mind, try to understand the mind endlessly, and still be fully engaged in this physical being. Also, by studying the mind, you can understand the soul of the individual. Very long explanation, but this is manas. It is the mind. We can see in this rune a reflection of equals. So there's also a cooperative aspect. Manas means man, and we see in this rune a reflection of the Wunyo rune. Now Wunyo means joy, and its symbol is the tribal or the clan banner that they would raise over their campsite. The ancient Norse were very tribalist, were very clannish, but this rune reminds us that humanity is all one. That I look at you and I see a reflection of myself. So there's a very cooperative aspect to this. There's a notion of unity. So what does that mean in the south, in the fire element? This is the activating principle, that a recognition of this unity, of this shared humanity or shared commonality, depending on the character and the story, that recognition and that of unity and of cooperation will move the situation into its next sequence, its next cycle. So this recognition, where we had before, opposite this in the north, we have Elhaj reversed, we have vulnerability or misuse of power, a betrayal of power, is trying to keep the situation as it is, trying to prevent this purification. A recognition of commonality, a recognition of cooperation, of shared humanity, of shared essence, will allow that purification to take place, will allow this scene to move into action and to move forward. That is manas in the south in fire. So now we have the element of air in the west. If you're familiar with Eastern traditions, you would see this as the metal element. Eastern traditions, feng shui, what have you. And they serve the same purpose. They are contracting elements. As metal cools from the liquid state, it contracts, it pulls in on itself. In the same way, as you release air, your lungs contract and push that air out into the world. This resists or balances that expansive element of ether and keeps things in balance. This is air in the west. Now the west is also the realm, this is Vanaheim. Now the Vanir were the gods of time and space. These were the deities associated with fertility, with harvest, with sensuality, with sexuality, but all those things of having to do with being in a physical body, living in time and space. This is in distinction to the Aesir, the gods that you know from Asgard. So Odin, Frigg, Thor. These are gods of timeless perfection. They are the celestial deities in Asgard. The Vanir in Vanaheim are very much associated with physical incarnation, with earthly terrestrial existence. So the things of the body, of the senses, the things of artwork, of music, of good food, of sexuality, of physicality. These are the gods associated with that. So we think of the physical pleasures. However, since there's a contracting element to this, it's a limitation, a slight limitation. We think of the expansive elements in the East as leading into a heightened spirituality. East is the direction of sunrise, that is the enlivening of the soul. So while those elements are looking for the ultimate highest good, the elements in the East are looking for the greatest comfort and the greatest pleasure. This satisfies the body. It satisfies the emotions, the sensuality, the desires of the body, and these are good things. They are not to be shunned. The Norse were not prudes. They enjoyed being in the body, and they enjoyed the sensual pleasures. So this is a good thing. However, it's not the highest good, that the universal and the soul level good that comes from the Eastern element. I tend to think of this as the overly protective mother. No offense to overly protective mothers. But they're looking for the highest, their expression of the highest good for the person. They're looking for comfort. They're looking for safety. They're looking for ease. And this can result in limiting the potential of the child if that mother refuses ever to let go. If she's always trying to mother and to protect the child can never grow and expand beyond mom and dad's basement. So that's this. These are the contracting forces, not necessarily harmful. They want the good, but the character or the scene will be limited if they're limited only to what this rune, what this force offers. So in this position we have Nauthiz. Nauthiz means need or necessity. It can be interpreted as an emergency. I need this right now. I prefer to look at this as necessity as the mother of invention, of innovation. We see in the shape of the rune stave, it looks like a bow drill, which can be used to make fire. And for the Norse, living very close to the Arctic Circle, sometimes above the Arctic Circle, the ability to make fire was a huge need to produce food, to create warmth, to create light. So that is this element. Sometimes this rune is seen as a negative rune. It cannot be reversed, so it is what it is. It's sometimes seen as a negative rune, that dire circumstances are about to appear. Not necessarily the case. Again, it's in how you approach it, how you deal with it once it happens. If emergency strikes and you lose your shit, bad things are going to happen. If emergency strikes and you harness all your resources, you bring together your physical abilities, your mental faculties, your allies around you, and react and create a response to the situation, good things can happen. So it's all about context and how your characters, or in real life, how people react to the emergency that arises, to the necessity. Does it create destruction or does it foster innovation? So what we have here is a situation of necessity, of a need that can rally those forces. Again, this is in the contracting forces. It's looking for the greatest comfort for the individual. We can think of this, I would think of this in my particular scene as exactly that, as warmth and light, as a good meal by the campfire, a warm bed, fire-warmed stones at the foot to keep the sleeping mat warm during the night, as opposed to going out into the cold and the darkness. That might create a greater transformation. The warmth of this rune, of the campfire, will bring comfort, will bring sustenance to the character in this situation, but may tend to limit the purification, the transformation that could otherwise take place. Not a bad place to be, but there can be more. So that, my friends, is an example of the 5 elements rune casting. So go ahead and try this for yourself, for your particular story, for a character or a scene, perhaps even a sequence or an entire act of your story. As with all the runes, they can also be used for personal insight, for personal growth, and I encourage you to try those out as well. So my friends, thank you. Again, I am Mark Graham with the Source of Story YouTube channel and Runes for Writers. This has been the 5 Elements Runecasting, and I look forward to hearing your story with the runes. Thanks.